So yeah, I'm making a video because I am sick of finding this bullshit online. So uh yeah, why do we have people on both sides argue shit like, oh, I'm sex repulsed, so ban all kink. I mean, that's not gonna happen, but fine. Just keep quiet. But then on the other side, there's also constant popular arguments going. Uh, Anyone who doesn't want nudity, anyone who doesn't want any form of kink, anyone who doesn't want anything whatsoever, anyone who says that any of this could ever possibly be alienating to any asexual, sex averse survivors of sexual trauma, survivors of other kinds of trauma, uh, kids, and so on, and trans people who are really dysphoric. You know, anyone who argues that any of these people have ever felt unwelcome because of people like us being a little bit too pumped up about kink at Pride is a Nazi. And I just want to say there is a problem I have become aware of about people just being too willing to call shit stuff like that, which uh, yeah, it is a little bit problematic the way that some white, Gentile, and so on LGBT people like throwing around words about people being cops and people being Nazis and people policing this or that and so on, when some people have serious trauma from police and Nazis and so on. This is another tangent. Essentially, I just want to say, why can't we just say kink belongs at Pride, but some of you are a bit too eager to embrace this as the pinnacle of your radicalism, uh, as if it's not basically saying that cis straight kinksters are more radical than an LGBT plus but sex averse person or something, which is definitely the vibe I get from some of these people. My opinion on it is that some people are hung up on it because really they don't actually like ace people, they don't actually like sex averse people, they don't actually like any acknowledgement that we might have slightly different needs to other LGBT plus people. They don't like survivors of trauma who are outspoken about things that trigger them. There's so much rhetoric that really makes me feel like it's a sort of bootstrap argument for survivors, where it's like everyone who's a survivor of trauma needs to just shut up and take personal responsibility for their triggers, as if it's not perfectly sensible to assume that a space that has not been made for the sake of, I don't know, say nudity, for example, because I saw popular people argue for nudity at Pride. So it's not that there is a big nudity at Pride thing, but it is that there are a lot of people who argue that it's fine. And so, for example, right, take nudity at Pride. Arguing that people in a community that has extremely high rates of sexual trauma are never going to be disturbed by uh, the potential for someone to be completely naked is just so off-putting to me. It's just disingenuous to act like this is the same as someone who has a trigger of, I don't know, whistling, or someone who has a phobia of spiders. Obviously, we don't accommodate those things, but if you're serious about advocating for other LGBT plus people and aware that other LGBT plus people have a lot of trauma, you're gonna factor in people having triggers that might be, particularly common around stuff like that, and maybe not argue that because nudity is not inherently sexual, it's irrational for anyone who's triggered by it to say they feel unwelcome at Pride. Another example I came across that really brought my attention to the fact that there are actually other triggers that uh, people can have that, again, are common things that should be taken into account is that, for example, paddling and using belts on people and stuff in a BDSM sense might be triggering to someone who's only familiar with that from their physical abuse. I just don't understand why we can't have just respect given to the fact that some triggers are different to others in the sense that people have a right to expect them not to be triggered constantly. Anyway, I can't really make a very coherent argument because I'm just pissed off at people on Twitter, and that's never really going to produce much creative output or inspiration or useful topics of conversation, really. But I'm making a video about it, probably partly because I can't speak to my sister about this because she really struggles with the discourse from the opposite ends of things, and so it kind of leaves me limited for who to talk to about it. But, I'm someone who is ace, someone who has big issues around sex, someone who has dealt with a lot of trauma, quite a lot of it sexual, some of it kind of in between sexual and physical. And during the sexually abusive relationship I was in, a big thing that I struggled with was intrusive thoughts focusing on genitals and on sex and stuff. And it had this big feeling of being out of control. And so I just kind of, you know, I get uncomfortable with some of the conversations that go online about people just having to not go to Pride if they know they'll be triggered or something. Or you can't expect your triggers to be accommodated and so on. It's well, I've had so many triggers that I've not expected to be accommodated. But also, I notice that if I say anything about them, they are also other people are also quick to assume I am much more demanding of them than I am, and quick to assume that even talking about being triggered by something is making a demand on other people to change their behavior radically. There are very specific reasons why you can say maybe don't have too much stuff around genitals at Pride. Uh, the first is that it's a place where people want to feel safe around others like them who are also LGBT plus, and when that community is disproportionately facing a lot of sexual trauma, part of feeling safe is having greater respect for potential widespread triggers of the trauma, which, you know, perfectly reasonably includes full nudity. I'm just gonna end the video now. There's not really anything more to say, I think, but yeah.